Let's continue the Poetry Interpretation Kit. Part 5. It is an autumn afternoon as I record this. A little bit chilly, a little bit gray, so I am drinking a nice warm cup of tea. Figurative language. These are things that we might also call tropes. A metaphor, or as one of my teachers in Southern Illinois called it, a metaphor. He wasn't from Southern Illinois, he was from Alabama, so he said metaphor. We would typically say metaphor. A metaphor is using a familiar thing to describe an unfamiliar thing. A simile is the same rhetorical or cognitive function as a metaphor, but it uses the word like or as. And in my mind, a metaphor is more forceful and a simile is sort of stepping back, saying, well, it's not that, but it's like that. Hyperbole is where you exaggerate or you go big for comic effect. Understatement, the opposite of that. And I was having trouble thinking of a word for that, so I came up with unexaggeration. But it's kind of exaggeration, but just in the opposite direction, going smaller for comic effect. And irony is some discrepancy between what is said and what's done, or what is known or what is meant. Figurative language with John. So metaphor, using a familiar thing to describe an unfamiliar thing. Sometimes whoever seeks abroad may find thee sitting careless on a granary floor, thy hair soft lifted by the winnowing wind, or on a half-reaped furrow sound asleep, drowsed with the fume of poppies, while thy hook spares the next swath and all its twined flowers. This is probably more familiar for someone in a rural setting in the 1800s when this was written. But I think the one that does seem familiar, he's talking about autumn. The whole poem is to autumn. I think we can picture someone who was working and took a break. We can picture a woman with hair lifted by the winnowing wind, and we can picture someone sleepy and falling asleep in the middle of work. So even though we're not familiar with this particular agriculture scene, we are able to picture someone having their hair blown lightly. We're able to picture someone falling asleep in the middle of a task. Simile is the same as the metaphor, again, saying like as as. So here he has, sometimes like a gleaner, thou dost keep steady thy laden head across the brook. Style is about the choices that the poet made, whether consciously or unconsciously. Sometimes writers are very conscious of the choices they're making, particularly when they're revising. Sometimes it's just instinct. Diction means what word did you choose to use? Do you use profanity or not? How formal is it? How informal is it? And sentence structure is type of sentence and the order of the wording. Diction with Keats. Sometimes like a gleaner, thou dost keep. Thou is a more formal way to say you, and dust is a more formal old-fashioned way to say does. That's an example of his diction that let us understand that this was an older poem. And you could say, sometimes you keep your head steady like a gleaner. That would maybe be the normal conversational way to say that. You know, sometimes you keep your head steady like a gleaner, but he's inverting things to make the rhyme work. And sometimes like a gleaner, thou dost keep steady thy laden head across the brook. The place where I notice that the most is steady. That's the one where it seems the most out of order. Part 6. Time for a tea break.